It seems my husband has been possessed by an evil spirit. This house will be given to Jenny. If you disagree, let's divorce. To think that the house I bought would be given to our eldest son's spouse. You better leave this house quickly. Ha ha. My husband sided with his daughter-in-law. I will put the house under my name. A monthly repayment of $1,800 is possible. Haha, my eldest son is also on his wife's side. Well, I'm no longer attached to such a dirty house. Then, as you all say, I will leave this house. You three will suffer from now on. Be on the lookout for what's about to happen. My name is Dorothy, and I am 60 years old. I hold a senior position in a leading company and have a higher status than usual. I live with my husband, Frank, who is 2 years younger than me. Last year, we renovated our house in preparation for the future. Our house was built by my father and has aged and deteriorated over the years. Therefore, we wanted to improve the living conditions to spend the coming years comfortably. However, considering our age, the monthly repayment amount is somewhat high at $1,800. But since I am an executive at a large company, the chances of passing the loan screening are pretty high. Frank works in management at a medium-sized restaurant but earns less than me, so the loan is more likely to be approved in my name. My salary alone makes it difficult to continue with the house loan. This house, originally belonging to your father, is currently registered in your name. I'm sorry, but could you take on the full amount of the loan? In return, I will contribute more to the household than before. After such a discussion, we decided to renovate. The renovated house has become more comfortable to live in, almost like a different place. It's very pleasing to know that by renovating the house I've lived in since childhood, I can continue to live here for a long time. I never imagined that the day I would leave this house would come. It was sudden. My cell phone vibrated. I'm getting married. My son Steve told me over the phone. Steve is 31 years old and works as a middle manager in a leading company. My eldest son, who has always been an excellent student, devoted to his studies and club activities, has continued to be enthusiastic about his work as an adult. That might be why I have never heard about his romantic relationships. I was very curious about the woman he was considering marrying. I wonder what kind of person she is. If Steve chose her, she must be charming. However, I'm worried that Steve, who has little experience in love, might be taken advantage of by someone with ulterior motives. I was filled with excitement and worry about meeting the woman my son brought home for the first time. Then, the day of the first meeting arrived. A woman with brown hair and a white chiffon dress, exuding purity, came to visit. I'm Jenny, please take good care of me. She was polite and charming, making for a likable first impression. I'm honored to meet you, father and mother. She smiled, showing her sparkling white teeth. If it's her, I can entrust my son with ease. I felt this way, and it seemed Frank shared a similar opinion, showing a smile. She's a wonderful girl. When Frank murmured that, she said, I'm so happy to hear that from you, Dad. I look forward to getting along with you. Gripping Frank's hand tightly and looking back at him. What's happening? Her intimacy surprised me, and I was a bit bewildered. Steve seemed surprised as well. However, a complex expression appeared on Frank's face. It wasn't jealousy, but it wasn't a comfortable feeling either. What are you doing? I asked, wishing for her to avoid such actions for my son's sake. She panicked. Oh, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done this upon our first meeting. And quickly apologized, withdrawing her hand from Frank's. I'm often told that I don't understand personal space. It's not intentional, but I'm truly sorry. It seemed like it really wasn't intentional. Still, I was somewhat surprised by her actions, considering I initially had a good impression of her. However, Steve truly loved her. Yeah, Jenny might have a strange sense of personal space. Haha, but that's part of her charm. I'm not good at talking with women, but she approached me proactively. That's why we could become so close and consider marriage. I didn't expect Steve, who is usually passive towards the opposite gender, to change so much because of Jenny. Please take care of Steve. despite various emotions. If she is a good person, everything will surely be okay. I accepted their engagement. Afterwards, things progressed swiftly, and within a few weeks, they had officially submitted their marriage registration. I wished for the best for their future happiness. One day, half a year after they got married, I'm home. Huh? When I returned from work, there were unfamiliar women's shoes at the entrance. Stepping into the living room, I found Jenny. "Oh, Mother, welcome back." The table was littered with empty cans and bottles of alcohol. It seemed they were enjoying some drinks. "What's this?" I wondered about the two of them having a party without Steve. I happened to meet Jenny on my way back from work. We talked about wanting to get closer, so we decided to drink together. But since it was before payday and money was tight, I suggested drinking at home. Why have a party at home? It would have been ideal if Steve also joined, and we all could have had fun together. I don't want to intrude on the newlyweds, but it would have been better if we gathered at Steve and Jenny's place. I tilted my head and answered, "Indeed, we could have done it at our house, but the beauty of this residence is exceptional, and our place is a bit messy right now." Jenny's speech was unclear. She was slurring her words, clearly quite drunk. Hearing her normally precise speech become lax under the influence of alcohol was unexpected. But what was the reason for enjoying the alcohol just between the two of them? Why didn't you call Steve? I found it unusual for a daughter-in-law to come to her in-law's house to drink, especially during the honeymoon phase. After seeing them together, I started to look for Steve. Steve is currently busy with work and working late into the night. Because of that, I've been feeling very lonely. Jenny said, starting to cry. "It's okay, Jenny, you've done nothing wrong. The problem lies with Steve, who leaves you alone despite being newlyweds." Saying this, Frank gently stroked her head. "What, Father? What is this situation? I feel increasingly uncomfortable." "Look, Frank, Jenny is Steve's wife. It's wrong to do this, especially to Steve." I scolded Frank for his excessive behavior. And then, suddenly, "Oh, don't be so harsh on Father." Jenny stood up for Frank. "What?" I reflexively uttered in surprise, confused by her statement. I had a lot I wanted to say, but the day's fatigue made everything feel bothersome. "I'm going to take a bath. Please clean up after yourselves," I said with a sigh and headed to the bathroom. Afterwards, I called Steve to explain the situation, and he replied that he would leave work and come to pick her up immediately. Jenny's behavior seemed very odd to me. However, the fact that Steve rushed over to get her showed me how deep his affection is towards her. But I couldn't shake off the feeling that their future domestic life might be somewhat troublesome. Reluctantly, I decided to give advice about their future life when Steve arrived. While lost in thought in the bathroom, quite some time had passed. Returning to the living room with a somewhat dazed mind from the heat, Steve should have already picked up Jenny, but oddly, despite coming by car, they both seemed to be enjoying alcohol. "Steve, you came by car, right? Why are you drinking?" I asked, to which Steve, appearing drunk and cheerful, replied, "Actually, Jenny told me to drink, and it turned out we're staying over tonight. It's good news that my son is staying over." However, the unexpected accompaniment of his wife was somewhat concerning. The decision felt quite abrupt. "What?" I was inwardly astonished, but Steve had already drunk alcohol. "Hey, Mom can drive you. It's okay." I didn't want the daughter-in-law to stay over. Despite feeling tired, I offered to drive them home. However, Steve said, "Come on, it's okay. You're tired too, right? Why don't you join us for a drink instead?" With an innocent smile. At that moment, I found myself speechless without any room for argument. Haha, huh? At that instant, a feeling of discomfort sprouted within me. Suddenly, Jenny looked at me with a smirk, as if her smile harbored some conspiracy. Could it be? It seemed like she was laughing at my puzzled appearance. "It's just my imagination, right?" I truly hoped it was a misunderstanding, but in reality, her plan had already been set in motion at that point. The next day, Jenny apologized deeply for her missteps multiple times. "I am terribly sorry," she said before leaving, and I felt like peace had finally been restored, overwhelmed by fatigue. But when I returned home that day, Jenny was there again. Steve was nowhere to be seen. Disheartened by the previous day's events, there was a change in her demeanor. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience again, but I really wanted to apologize in person," she said, handing over some sweets. "I too lost my composure yesterday. I'm truly sorry." Frank seemed regretful as well. Seeing their remorse, I decided to forgive them this time. "I appreciate it." Jenny seemed genuinely relieved, but perhaps because the situation was quite awkward, she stopped visiting our home afterwards. Honestly, I did not want to get deeply involved either, so I was grateful for that outcome. Then one day, Frank, with a serious look, said, "I have something to tell you." As I waited in the living room, wondering what was going on, Steve and Jenny visited for the first time in a while. "It's been a while," I greeted, but they seemed to ignore my words and passed by as if they hadn't heard me. Perhaps my voice didn't reach them. Suddenly, Frank declared loudly, "This house will be given to Jenny. If you disagree, let's divorce." "What?" I was astonished. The discussion of transferring the house to Jenny came out of nowhere. It was a baffling situation. While I was confused, Jenny said, "Please, leave this place." "What does she mean?" "I'm confused." "Wait a minute. What do you mean by transferring the house to Jenny?" I asked, to which Frank replied, "You've been making Jenny suffer, haven't you? That's unforgivable. She's such a good girl. Making her suffer. There's no such fact." However, Frank refused to listen to my argument. "Shut up. I heard it from her. That's why she was crying, saying she couldn't go home." Frank continued angrily, with Jenny shedding tears. "Why has it come to this?" Then Steve also burst out in anger. "I never thought my mother could do such a thing. You're horrible." The more I denied, the angrier they became, and Jenny's tears didn't stop. "That's why we're going to divorce. Leave this house immediately." I plan to continue living here with them. I couldn't understand why I had to transfer my own house to Jenny. When I asked for the reason, because Jenny is deeply hurt. We could have sought compensation, but we thought of a better solution. Taking this valuable house from you and giving it to Jenny is the appropriate punishment for you, was the response I received, even though I didn't make her suffer. Why should I face such retaliation? It's impossible for Jenny, who quit her job after getting married, to pay a monthly loan of $1,800, I argued. "Don't worry. We'll change the name to Steve. As long as Steve is working, the name change should be possible right away. However, there are restrictions on changing the name on a loan contract, so it wouldn't be that simple." In reality, changing the loan terms wouldn't be easy. I doubt the bank will allow it. When I counted, Frank said, "Don't worry, not only you, but Steve also works at a letting company. Plus, I have an acquaintance at the financial institution where you have the loan. If I talk to him, it should go smoothly." Appearing fully convinced. "Yeah, a monthly repayment of $1,800? Piece of cake." Influenced by Frank's confidence, Steve also agreed. Gradually, the reality of transferring the house to them became apparent. I've said it many times, but I didn't do anything to her. There's no way I'm handing over this house. As I strongly objected, they became furious again. I was fed up with this situation. Then Jenny, who had been crying all this time, spoke up. "Mother, for the sake of us and our unborn child, please," she pleaded while caressing her belly. Unbelievable. "Mom, Jenny is actually pregnant right now. If her mental state becomes unstable, it could lead to the worst-case scenario. That's why I hope you can be a bit more lenient." Steve revealed the fact of her pregnancy. Indeed, stress during pregnancy should be avoided. However, being forced to transfer my home based on unfounded accusations is unacceptable. My heart was filled with turmoil. "I need some peace and quiet," I said, leaving the scene for the bedroom. Could I have unconsciously made Jenny suffer? I pondered while lying in bed when I found a strand of brown hair on the bed. "What's this?" Both Frank and I have black hair, so finding brown hair here is strange. Could it be Frank? My heart was disturbed. After the recent troubles, to find such a shocking discovery was overwhelming. I was getting confused. What's in the world? I cried myself to sleep. Waking up late at night, I was headed to the living room when I heard voices inside. Apparently, Steve and Jenny hadn't gone home yet. I wished I could have joined the evening drink. Someone said, "But Jenny, you're pregnant. You need to refrain," was the response. Hearing Frank and Jenny conversing joyfully, it felt like there was no space for me. My heart was heavy due to Jenny's inexplicable complaints. Standing frozen outside the living room, suddenly, an intimate sound reached my ears. "Ah, Jenny, I love you." Frank's voice. "Stop it, Frank. If Steve and Mother find out," Jenny replied. Shocked, I was disturbed by what Frank and Jenny were doing. "What on earth is happening?" "Don't worry. Steve is completely drunk, and Dorothy has been cooped up in her room all this time. She must be asleep by now." Haha, they were discussing. Haha, maybe she's angry and hiding under the bed? How funny. Haha, they laughed together. The brown hair I found was probably Jenny's. This is very unpleasant. What were they doing on my bed where I slept? I felt sick. They intend to push me out and secretly enjoy themselves with Jenny. My house being used inappropriately like this. Fine. I'll leave this uncomfortable house behind. However, I won't forget this. I thought to myself. The next day, I appeared in front of the three as if nothing had happened. In reality, I couldn't sleep in that bed anymore, too shocked to even close my eyes. "So, you've finally decided to transfer the house?" They smiled all at once when I said, "I've decided to transfer the house." "Great. Let's go for the name change procedures. I'll easily pass the loan screening." Steve was excited. He knows nothing. Although it saddened me at the moment, I had no intention of revealing the truth to my son. He wouldn't listen to his mother since he was under his wife's thumb. At least not yet. Afterwards, busy days of divorce proceedings and name changes followed. The name change process wasn't easy, but it was eventually completed. "This house is no longer yours." Haha, Frank taunted. "Hurry up and leave, old hag." Haha, Jenny whispered in my ear. I felt nothing but anger. They were the ones who were supposed to leave. I intended to make them, but not before getting back at them. Letting go of the home I had lived in since I was born was painful. Yet, I could no longer feel attached to a place associated with infidelity. I planned to use this abnormal situation to create turmoil between them. Wait and see when the time comes. A month after I left the house. "I'm ready," is what I said and headed to my former home. As I pressed the doorbell, Frank responded irritably, "What do you want, stranger?" Despite it being our first encounter in a long time. "I have something to discuss. Won't you let me in?" I answered firmly. "Why should I let you into the house?" Frank stubbornly refused my entry. "I have something very important to discuss, especially to Jenny." "An important matter concerning Jenny?" Frank's response shifted. Mentioning her name, they readily invited me inside. Using her name was the last thing I wanted. However, it was clear that Frank was heavily influenced by her, so I leveraged that. "You're a stranger now." Stranger. Even though legally we're strangers after the divorce, that term felt too heartless. I was infuriated by Frank's reaction. "Why are you here now?" They became more guarded. "I want you to see this," I said, displaying some photographs. "What is this?" Their surprised voices filled the room. The photos were of Frank and her on a date, captured by a detective I hired to follow them after our divorce, recording their moments together. "Wait, what? This is..." Steve was unsettled. "So what? We're just daughter-in-law and father-in-law with a good relationship. Nothing more, right? Why would you take such meaningless photos?" "What do you want?" They insisted they were just close. "Really? Then what about this?" I pulled out my smartphone and played a certain audio. "I've always liked Jenny. Keep your voice down, or Steve and my mother-in-law will hear." Their voices and inappropriate sounds were recorded. "What's this?" On the day I discovered their relationship, I had secretly recorded their conversation. "You're just misunderstanding." Frank desperately tried to explain. "Misunderstanding? This is clearly a problem." Steve erupted in anger. Jenny just looked down. I pressed further. "Let me ask you, Whose child is in your belly, really? Steve's complexion changed. Could it be Dad's? He was lost for words. That's impossible. He always comes. Oh, she inadvertently confessed. You admitted it. You just said it. Their argument intensified and Frank and Steve got into a scuffle. Ouch! Jenny seemed to be in pain, which made them stop fighting. I seized the moment. Haven't I always said? I didn't make Jenny suffer. Did you lie to get rid of me, to convince Steve? Steve was shocked. No, I'm the worst. Why didn't I believe my mom? He blamed himself for being swayed by Jenny and doubting his mother. It's so clear now. We should talk about this. Steve raised his voice at them. Initially silent, with all this evidence, are you considering a lawsuit? Apparently, Jenny initially had genuine feelings for Steve. But upon visiting our newly renovated beautiful home before their marriage, she began to desire it. My family home was a bit run down, and I aspired for such a beautiful house. The interior was also quite lovely. She tearfully explained. Wanting the house, she decided to get closer to Frank, using opportunities when he returned from work to drink without Steve. The months she didn't visit the house, she became close to Frank, plotting to get rid of me. You could have just suggested living together from the start. When I said that, she remained silent before finally responding. I don't have a positive impression of mothers-in-law. My own mother and grandmother were always fighting, and my grandmother constantly bullied my mother. So, I wanted to avoid living with my mother-in-law. Getting rid of you was the only solution to live comfortably in a beautiful house. If she had such an image of a mother-in-law, she wouldn't want to live together. But to go as far as taking my husband. However, how did Frank perceive this situation? I knew I was being used, but I fell for her the moment we exchanged greetings, shook hands, and she smiled at me. Despite knowing he was being used, Frank fell in love and decided to abandon me to keep her by his side. You guys are really unforgivable, Steve said as both of them looked down, tears streaming down their faces. Steve decided to get a divorce. DNA tests on the newborn confirmed Frank as the father. I won't be paying child support, he declared, demanding alimony from them. I made a similar choice. I never thought I'd be demanding alimony from my own father. I gently patted Steve's head as he sobbed. Our lives were thrown into chaos because of a foolish woman's actions. However, the life that got thrown into chaos the most was her own, which she would regret forever. My prediction was spot on. 2 years later, she chose to continue living with Frank in a de facto marital relationship, claiming it was for the child's sake. And to work and raise her child, she had to leave her newborn at daycare. Today, Grandpa, Dad came to pick you up, huh? She seemed to attract attention from other mothers at the daycare. While the children played well together, she felt lonely not being able to make any mom friends. Additionally, when she explained her divorce and relationship with Frank to her parents, they got furious, directing their anger at Frank too. Now, she is estranged from them. This was all the result of her own choices. Meanwhile, Steve lives alone in that house. I wanted to sell it, but that would be too cruel to Mom. After all, this is the house where Mom has lived all her life. I couldn't sell a house filled with such memories. He felt disgusted by the house and considered selling it but couldn't due to guilt, possibly influenced by my repeated expressions of discomfort towards the house. He arranged for house cleaning and disposed of all possessions belonging to Frank and her. Steve, acknowledging the trouble caused by her, said, "It might be because of that woman, but I've troubled you, Mom. You might not be able to forgive me, but please let's meet up sometimes. Visit the house. And let me be a good son to you from now on." And gave me trip tickets. Steve has shown deep remorse. Although I can't forgive him just yet, I'm willing to work towards restoring our relationship.